Welcome to Curator Battle, where 3 Imperial War Museum curators go head to head to find the most interesting objects in the IWM collection. This time, they'll be taking to the skies with a trio of ultra-rare biplanes from the First World War. Now, let's meet our curators. In the yellow corner, it's the learned Alan Wakefield, head of IWM's First World War team. He'll be making the case for the Airco DH.9.
The DH.9 should have given Britain the edge in aerial bombing. That it didn't was no fault of the aircraft's excellent design.
In the blue corner, it's the unflappable Bryn Hammond, principal curator of IWM's collections. He'll be championing the Royal Aircraft Factory R.E.8.
This is one of only 2 original R.E.8s left in the world, and it has a brilliant story to tell.
Finally, in the red corner, it's the tenacious Rebecca Greenwood Harding, IWM's head of technological objects. She'll be fighting for the Royal Aircraft Factory B.E.2.
The B.E.2 has been much criticised at times, but it has a fascinating history with a number of world firsts to its name.
That's our lineup. Now each curator has 3 minutes to tell us about their aircraft. After that, all 3 will go head to head in a no-holds-barred historical punch-up before trying to agree on a winner. First, let's take a look at the stats. Today, we have 3 two-seater biplanes from the First World War. The B.E.2 is the oldest aircraft, entering service in 1914, and the DH.9 the most modern, entering service in 1918, and that is reflected in the numbers. The DH.9 has the highest power, speed and service ceiling. It also has the biggest bomb load, while the B.E.2 was initially introduced with no armament at all. Remember, we aren't searching for the best aircraft of the 3, but what we are looking for is the most fascinating member of the IWM collection. And with that in mind, let's go over to our curators. First up, it's Alan and the DH.9.
Unlike the other 2 aircraft under the spotlight today, this machine, the DH.9, was a development of a true star amongst First World War airplanes, the DH.4, arguably the best light bomber and long-range reconnaissance aircraft of the war. A major plus in the DH.9's favour is that this is the only one to have been designed by a forward-thinking commercial company, Airco, under the aviation pioneer Geoffrey de Havilland, rather than the state-owned Royal Aircraft Factory, which tended to lag behind in terms of innovation. However, the story of this aircraft is an aviation equivalent of a rock band's difficult second album. The DH.9 resulted from a dramatic moment in the summer of 1917. On the 13th of June, a formation of German aircraft bombed London. Public outrage was instant and the government called for retaliation. The DH.9 light bomber was touted as the aircraft to spearhead this long-range, strategic bombing offensive. The new aircraft utilised 90% of the parts of the DH.4 airframe, enabling rapid production. A big contract had been placed for a new 300 horsepower engine, and this was selected for the new DH.9. Sadly, it was that engine that let this aircraft down. This engine was fundamentally unreliable, but as much government support and public money were tied up in the new engine's production, all that could be done was to reduce the power of the engine in the hope that the lower stresses would prevent engine failure. As a result, the aircraft's performance was below that of the DH.4, which it was designed to replace, leaving the aircraft at the mercy of enemy fighters and prone to crashes through engine failure. Imagine flying in formation for up to 4.5 hours at altitudes of up to 15,000 feet in an aeroplane powered by a single potentially dodgy engine, attacked by growing numbers of high-performance German fighters, and without the benefits of a parachute, with only maps and a compass to guide you to and from your target, and you get some idea of what the crews flying DH.9s faced on each of those strategic bombing missions. And yet despite all this, the DH.9 still made its mark. It played a major role in breaking the Turkish army in Palestine and the Bulgarian army in Macedonia during the closing months of the First World War. Indeed, once fitted with the superb US Liberty 12 or Rolls-Royce Eagle 8 engine, the true capabilities of this aircraft shone through. Reborn as a DH-9A, this aircraft, along with the Bristol fighter, helped save the RAF as an independent armed force after 1918, through its success in service at trouble spots across the British Empire. But perhaps the most extraordinary story is the journey of this particular DH-9 to Duxford. We don't know its exact service history, but we do know that it was one of 3 aircraft gifted to Maharaja Ganga Singh of Bikaner under the Imperial Gift Scheme as a reward for the troops and money he contributed to the British war effort. The Maharaja didn't fly the aircraft, instead he used the engines to power an irrigation scheme. The airframes were dismantled and stored in a disused elephant house at his palace in Rajasthan. There they remained for almost 80 years until rediscovered. Then 2 of the aircraft returned to the UK for painstaking restoration, one even being brought back to full flying condition. Out of more than 4,000 built, this aircraft is one of only 6 survivors today. Its story tells a tale of war, empire and early aviation.
That was a strong showing from Alan despite his aircraft's lack of pedigree. Now let's see what Bryn has to say about his R.E.8.
The R.E.8 as a type was not the flashiest of aircraft, but the R.E.8 here at IWM Duxford has a fascinating story. Not only is this one of only 2 original R.E.8s left in the world, but it also saw action in the Second World War. Well, action of a sort. The R.E.8 was widely known as the Harry Tate, a popular comedian from the First World War era. It was mainly intended as a reconnaissance aircraft, but it could also be used as a day bomber. Okay, so it didn't have the best reputation when introduced, especially with inexperienced crews. They hated it because it was difficult to fly. More experienced pilots, however, saw it had advantages within its limitations. The problem was, in mid-1917, there wasn't a lot of time for aircrew to get experience. Learn quickly or you were dead. The R.E.8's slow speed and inherent stability made it easy prey during periods of the war when German fighters had air superiority. However, when better performing Allied fighter aircraft appeared later in that year, the R.E.8 became the unshowy, sturdy workhorse of the Royal Flying Corps and later the RAF. If you want evidence of how stable it was, take the case of the R.E.8 that, having fought off 6 German Albatros fighters with only 1 other R.E.8, flew straight and level for about 80 kilometres until its fuel ran out and it glided into land, despite the fact that both of the aircrew inside had been killed by a single bullet during the original attack. The R.E.8 was Britain's main artillery spotter aircraft from around mid-1917 to the end of the war. That meant flying watching artillery shells as they landed enemy lines and giving corrections to the friendly gunners to make their fire more accurate. Flying amongst the shells. The R.E.8 was also a brilliant platform for aerial photography. Aerial photographs were used to make accurate and up-to-date maps, which the big guns needed to locate and to target their opposite numbers. The dull but really important work that always gets forgotten, but that was needed to support the land battle. This specific R.E.8 finally arrived in France on the 11th of November 1918, the day the First World War ended, and went into store until it was sent to the Imperial War Museum in 1935. When IWM moved to the former Bethlehem Hospital the following year, the R.E.8 was suspended from the roof. While much of the collection was evacuated when the Second World War broke out in 1939, the R.E.8 remained in situ. I like to think it was taunting the German bombers. That taunting perhaps became insufferable, and later in the war, our R.E.8 saw action for the very first time. Although it suffered much damage from an air attack, it survived, battered but defiant, like many of its type in the First World War. After extensive repairs, the aircraft was moved to Duxford in 1974, and our Harry Tate has been here ever since.
A very good story from Bryn there, bringing us all the way up to the Second World War. Now, last but not least, it's Rebecca's turn to tell us about the B.E.2.
Now let's talk about the real star of today's video, the B.E.2, a true pioneer in British aviation history. Now, Alan was rather dismissive of the Royal Aircraft Factory, but despite not being officially approved to design and construct aircraft, only repair and maintain them, the factory worked hard to circumvent the system with the B.E.2 the end result. Of course, the design was not perfect, but we must remember that it was designed in 1912, when aircraft were very much still in their infancy, and the role of aircraft during wartime remained unexplored. One example of this is the position of the pilot and the observer. They're the wrong way round. The pilot's position behind the observer made for some interesting flying at times, especially when the crew came under attack from enemy fire and needed to defend themselves. Early wartime examples were not fitted with any defensive armament. Crews took to defend themselves with any firearm they could get their hands on, including service revolvers, pistols, rifles and machine guns such as the Lewis gun, which would eventually fitted as standard. When war broke out in August 1914, the B.E.2 was the first British aircraft to land in France a few days later. This is just one of the many firsts that the B.E.2 has to its name. A B.E.2 pilot was the first airman to be awarded the Victoria Cross. William Rhodes Morehouse was hit by enemy small arms fire while attacking a railway line of Courtrai in April 1915. He managed to return his aircraft safely to Allied lines, where he sadly died from his injuries the following day. Another B.E.2 pilot, William Leaf Robinson, was the first person to be awarded the Victoria Cross for military action in the UK, when he became the first British pilot to down a German airship, SL-11, over Cuffley in Hertfordshire in September 1916. A B.E.2C, like our one here, was also used for the first medical evacuation by air of a wounded British soldier. In Egypt in February 1917, Lance Corporal McGregor of the Imperial Camel Corps was transported to field hospital in 45 minutes rather than by land, a journey that would have taken several days. The B.E.2 was also one of the first aircraft to carry an airborne transmitter, and a small number of B.E.2 aircraft were converted to use airship gondolas to target German U-boats attacking British ships. So, what about our B.E.2C? We believe that 2699 was built in 1916, but we have no record of her operational history until February 1917, when she was recorded operating with No. 50 Squadron, a home defence squadron at Harrietsham in Kent. She was gifted to IWM by the RAF in September 1919, making her one of the oldest and earliest large objects in IWM's collection. 2699 immediately went on display at IWM's original location at Crystal Palace, but when IWM was forced to move to another site in the 1920s, this resulted in the now unthinkable loss of a number of aircraft and vehicles from the collection. However, 2699 thankfully escaped the big chop. She remained on display in London until moving to Duxford in 2012, where you can still see her today.
So there are our contenders. Rebecca's Zeppelin killer, Bryn's sturdy workhorse, and Alan's procurement nightmare. Do you have a favourite? Let us know in the comments. Now it's time for our curators to go head to head in a debate. Alan kicked us off, trying to get the sympathy vote.
I mean, I think out of the three, I probably had the hardest sell.
Yeah, I think you did, to be fair.
My favourite thing about the DH.9 is it might not have been a great success, but you can draw a direct line from the DH.9 through to the Mosquito in the Second World War and through to the Comet, the world's first jet airliner. They all were championed by Geoffrey de Havilland.
Yeah. And let's not forget, of course, the DH.9 served here at Duxford.
Yeah,
when
that's
Duxford
right.
was
It's
training
training base, that's right.
It's good. I grant you it's good, but it doesn't quite cut the mustard with me.
Bryn is a hard man to convince. What case can he make for his R.E.8?
I think because we've got to remember we're not here to decide which of the aircraft is the best in terms of its performance, but which is the most interesting. That for me is the crucial point about the R.E.8. It's its unglamorous role in supporting the land battle. There's a lot that's always about the aces. The aces are there to defend the aircraft that we've been talking about here while they do their job.
Your argument for the R.E.8, Bryn, can equally apply to the B.E.2, which came first, and the lessons that were learned from the B.E.2 were put into the R.E.8.
And of course, what they didn't want to do is have any association with the faults, problems, issues and reputation of the B.E.2C. So what do? They change the name so that it doesn't have any of those associations with your aircraft.
I'm not going to deny that the B.E.2 didn't have its problems, and it was known in the British press as Fokker fodder, but I'll go back to my original point I made earlier. Aircraft are very much in their infancy at this point. It was an innovator. It was finding its way in the world.
Strong defence from Rebecca there, which seems to have Alan confused as to which aircraft he's actually championing.
I also think with the B.E.2 is they kept reimagining how it could be used. So it starts off as a straight out reconnaissance machine. When it does become very easy to shoot down, they need a home defence night fighter to attack Zeppelins. To shoot down a bloody great Zeppelin, something that's stable, is just what you want. And it's still a training aircraft at the end of the war as well. So it goes all the way through the war, even though it is basically outdated by 16.
Exactly.
It's a good point in the aircraft's favour, he said grudgingly.
With Bryn on the ropes, it was Rebecca's turn to uncork a haymaker.
Let's be honest, when we came up with this challenge, we all wanted to talk about the B.E.2 because we all know she's the most interesting.
Well, I had to admit I did, because I'm very interested in aerial photography, and this again was a plane that they pioneered aerial photography in as well. With your position as head of technological objects at the museum, I had to give over this aeroplane to you, Rebecca, this time.
Sorry.
I've got no regrets. For me, the R.E.8's particular thing is it can look after itself. There was one particular crew, Pithy and Rhodes. Those two together accounted as a team for 10 enemy aircraft. They both won the DFC and won it again, so DFC and Bar. They are a fine example of this aircraft facing off the bullies who've come to try and take it out.
Absolutely, that's a really great story.
Yes, very magnanimous, but it's time to get down to brass tacks. Can they agree on a winner?
I'm in that situation where I want to stick by the aircraft that I've done now, having learnt so much about the R.E.8. Rebecca, what about you?
I'm sticking with my girl here. She is by far the most interesting of the three.
So I suppose we have to turn to the head of First World War to the final decision. What's it going to be?
Well, I am going to step away from the aircraft I was championing, because I think the other two aircraft were much more important. I think the most important aircraft here is the B.E.2. It was there before the war and it flew all the way through the war.
Quite right.
I can accept the decision.
The aircraft is so many first. There's so many different stories, surprising stories that are associated with this aircraft. So that for me makes her the star.
And there you have it. The winner of our very first Curator battle is Rebecca and her B.E.2. Let us know if you agree and what objects you'd like to see in a future Curator battle in the comments. We'll see you next time.